Hey everybody, today we are talking about repeats. Before we talk about repeats, let's talk about what a final bar line is. The final bar line looks like this thick line preceded by a thin line and indicates that the piece is coming to an end. But there's another type of double bar line that we can have. Those lines are of equal thickness and are preceded by two dots like these. This is a standard repeat sign. And unless otherwise indicated, which we'll talk about in a moment, it means to go back and play from the beginning. But what if the composer wanted us to repeat only a portion of the music and not go all the way back to the beginning? Well, we can put an opposite repeat sign here, which indicates that we want to play the music in between the brackets. Now, of course, there can be music that follows this repeat section, so it's important to understand that you should only repeat it once before moving on to the next part of the song. Here's an example of a German dance by Franz Schubert. And back to the beginning. And on to the next section. And we repeat. Before coming to the end. What if we want to repeat something but have it end slightly different the second time than we have it the first time? This is where first and second endings come in. If you look at this short waltz, also by Franz Schubert, you'll notice that there is a repeat and a repeat here, except this time there are brackets above these repeat signs. What this indicates is that the first time you play through the section, you'll play through measure 8, play the first ending, and then go back to the beginning. The second time, however, you'll skip the first ending and go straight to the second ending. After you play the second ending, you'll go on to the next section. You can see that Schubert has written a very similar structure here in the next section. You'll play measures 10 through 17, play the first ending, and then go back to the beginning of the section. The second time through, you'll play 10 through 16, then play the second ending at measure 18. Let's listen to what this sounds like. Here we come to the first ending and back to the beginning. And second ending, moving on. First ending, back. And moving on to the second ending here. Now, there are a handful of Italian terms that can also mean to repeat material. The first one we'll talk about is DC, which stands for da capo. This means from the head. If you see any kind of DC marking, it means to go back to the beginning, the head, the top. A common way you'll see DC is DC al fine. DC al fine means to go back to the beginning and continue to the fine. A good guideline when working with these Italian repeat phrases is to, number 1, wait for an instruction, and then number 2, follow the symbols. Let's take the example of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. The first time through the piece, you're going to ignore the fine. We want to wait for an instruction. When we get to the last measure of the piece, measure 8, we see DC al fine. That means go to the beginning and play to the fine. Let's check out how this sounds. Keep playing. Here's our instruction to go back to the beginning. And we end at the fine. Another word that you'll hear used with repeats is the word coda. A coda just refers to an ending, and it's often indicated with this symbol. You'll often see it paired with DC. DC al coda means to go back to the beginning, and then jump to the coda or ending when you see the coda symbol. This can get a little confusing because you'll actually see two coda symbols. The first coda symbol that you see indicates when you should move to the coda. The second coda symbol that you see will be at the actual coda, the ending. So following our guideline, we'll play through this piece until we get to an instruction. Here we reach an instruction to go back to the beginning and then go to the coda. So we'll go back and play from the beginning until we hit this coda sign. This tells us that we should jump to the ending. The coda will be located at the end of the piece and will be signified by this little coda symbol. So all you have to do is jump from the coda symbol to the matching coda symbol, and then we'll finish out the piece. So let's see what this sounds like. We'll start at the beginning and wait for an instruction. Skipping the sign, waiting for the instruction, and back to the beginning. Now to the coda. Another common Italian phrase you'll see is DS, which stands for dal segno, meaning return to the sign. If you see any kind of DS, it means to return to the place with this sign. So DS al fine means to go back to the sign and continue to the fine. This is different from DC al fine, which means go back to the beginning instead of back to the sign. So in the example of this short piece given below, we'll want to, as usual, wait for an instruction, which comes right at the end here. Once we get our instruction, dal segno al fine, it means go back to the sign, which is located here, and play to the fine. Notice that there is a double bar line here because this is the fine, or the end. So let's see what this sounds like. I'll keep going. Here's my instruction, back to the segno, to fine. Finally, we can combine the segno and the coda to help us get a little creative. DS al Coda means to go back to the segno, or the sign, and then jump to the coda when you see the coda symbol. So, as usual, we'll wait for our instruction first. We'll play all the way until we get an instruction. And here it is, DS al Coda, back to the sign, and then play to the coda. Once we get to this coda marker, it's telling us to jump, it's kind of like Chutes and Ladders, I guess, to the coda section, and then we'll play to the end. Here we see the double bar line. So playing this from the beginning, it sounds like this. Here's our instruction. Back to the sign. Jumping to the coda. So to review, we've got a number of different types of repeats. We've got repeat brackets, which can appear just by itself or two together. We can have repeat signs with first and second endings. We can have a DC al fine, which means play from the beginning to the fine. We can have DC al Coda, which means to play from the beginning to the coda sign and then jump to the coda. We can have a DS al fine, which means to go back and play from the segno to the fine. And we can have a DS al Coda, which means to play from the sign all the way to the coda indication and then jump to the coda. And those are the many ways that you can repeat material in music.